says linguistic diversity is incontestably one of the most characteristic features of the EU, affecting the social, cultural and professional lives of its citizens, as well as the economic and political activities of its member states. So there is a clear-cut policy on multilingualism. And of course, on the one hand, you have the multilingualism in society, where people need to communicate, where people need to understand each other's cultures, and where the objective of the Commission of the Union is that every citizen in Europe should be able to communicate in 2 other languages beside the mother tongue. Now, the other language, obviously, one of them will obviously be English or Globish, whatever you would like to call it. But we see the importance of the fact that English is not enough, and that a second language would be very useful for people to communicate with. Then you have, of course, the importance of multilingualism in business, in the economy. The language industry in itself represents the turnover of several billion euros. And a recent study has shown that enterprises in the European Union lose about 11% of business because of the lack of language skills of their employees. So in that respect, something should be done as well. And then we have the very important aspect of multilingualism in the decision-making process of the Union itself. And that is where we, the DG SCIC and the DG Translation, find their reason for being. Because in fact, the first ever legal act that was issued when the Union, or the community at the time, was created, was Regulation number 1 of the year 58. And in its first article, it says that the official languages of the Union, the community at the time, are the official languages of the member states. This means that we are legally, both Directors General are legally obliged to provide translation and interpretation, at least provide a minimum facilities for every single official language of the Union. And all this, as I've said, represents a huge operation. Now, contrary to DGT, because my colleague just said that DGT is not involved in any educational or training activities apart from being instrumental in creating the masters. On the other hand, DG SCIC has always been involved in training. Right from the beginning, when we still had 4 languages, we noticed that the universities were not in a position to produce a sufficient number of highly qualified interpreters that we needed. So what we did was to create a traineeship. We invited graduates from various disciplines who already had the required language skills, language proficiency, and the necessary analytical and synthetical skills to come to Brussels for a 6-month traineeship. And in 6 months' time, we taught them to acquire the interpretation skills in consecutive and simultaneous, and then they went on to work for us. And we did this, the training was done with our own interpreters. And this was a scheme that lasted until 96. It was abolished in 96. But it had been very instrumental in coping with the successive enlargements of the Union, when we had English added, Danish added, Greek, Portuguese, Spanish, afterwards Finnish and Swedish. But in 96, we abolished the system because, first of all, the member states were under the impression that we were responsible for training interpreters, while it clearly is their responsibility. Secondly, it was very costly in terms of human resources and financial resources, because we used our interpreters to do the training. And thirdly, we were faced with the doom scenario of the enlargement of 2004, where we had to deal with 9 different languages in one go. So what we did, we abolished the internal training scheme, but instead we developed a master, a European Master in Conference Interpreting called the EMCI. This was a model, is a model that is based on the experience that we acquired and the know-how that we acquired over the 30 years before with our internal training scheme. And it corresponds to a certain number of criteria. First of all, we think the best way to train interpreters is to do it in a postgraduate year, 1.5 year maybe. You should have a logical, a coherent progression in the training. It should be focused on the acquisition of interpretation skills. It's got fairly little to do with language training. So you go on from memory exercises to note-taking to consecutive to simultaneous. And another important element, a key element, is the fact that these skills are taught by professional practicing interpreters. So this EMCI model that we created was taken over and implemented in some dozens of universities across Europe. And there's even a consortium that is supported by us also financially that monitors the development and the implementation of the model. We still like to keep an eye on things. We are very much involved in working together with universities. We also give money to the universities that implement the system. We give bursaries to students, and we send our interpreters to train to those universities. It's a highly successful model, and from all over the world we are asked to provide our assistance. We have programs running with China, with Taiwan, with Vietnam. We are working together with the African Union, all because these countries also would like to implement the model that we have devised. And also, I may say, Russia is very interested in the model. In fact, I've just come back from a visit to St. Petersburg with my Director General, Mr. Marco Benedetti, who unfortunately can't be here today, where we inaugurated the new postgraduate school of interpretation and translation at Herzen State University, which has a model that corresponds to our EMCI model and which we support and which we will continue to support. And we are also open to other initiatives of the sort to provide our interpreters or our help. And I understand that even here in MSIU, the idea is to set up such a scheme, and we would be very willing to help, because the problems that we have are global, and we should approach them globally. For instance, we are faced with a shortage of English mother tongue interpreters, and we're trying to find ways and means globally, all over the world, to remedy this. And we have heard from the Russian side that they are faced with a generation gap, particularly in the United Nations, where Russian is an official language. And we are willing to help. And any initiative that is geared at the improvement of interpreter training will find our support. And that is also why we are here. And I thank you once again for your invitation, and I wish you a successful conference. Thank you.